Good morning and welcome to WNHH's Dateline, New Haven and Hamden. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. JR and JK make our community tick, and they're here in the WNHH studio. JR,
I'm sharing it. I'm doing it right now.
All right, man. JR is JR Romano. He is the state Republican chairman. He's one of my personal favorite guests on this show from time to time. Gives us a perspective we don't always hear a lot in our true blue city, including about this coming Tuesday's municipal elections in Connecticut.
Yes.
JK is JK, not initial K.
Yeah, Jaykaye.
Jay is the Republican candidate for mayor in Hamden. He's going to tell us all about that. Thanks to Yellow Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
You're the best, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
So you guys got a big day coming Tuesday, November 5th.
Yes.
It's an odd number year. So we actually don't have to argue about Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi. We could talk about how cities are run on the ground.
Well, as what I would consider you an intellectual liberal. Yes, that is correct. If you were a Democrat candidate like the candidate in Middletown, for example, you'd be sending mailers out about Mitch McConnell, and that isn't a joke, by the way. He absolutely sent mailers out in a municipal cycle about Mitch McConnell.
Right.
It's true.
All right, just to be fair, we don't go off on this. Both parties, when they think there's a vulnerability in how the other candidate's party is perceived because of the national party, they send out pictures. Nancy Pelosi pictures got sent out a few years ago for local candidates. Trump, Obama.
Well, in a presidential, sure. We did that with Dan Malloy, and we'll do that with Ned Lamont. At least they're the governor.
That was a state race, and they were a team. Okay, whatever that is.
All right, let's go. Who are we talking about? Where are we going?
We're talking about all the Republican strategy for the municipal elections. So Hamden, for instance, I want to talk about this in the show today, about how there are different parts of the state where Republicans are stronger and different municipalities where Democrats are stronger. Then you got places like Hamden, which when I was younger would kind of alternate sometimes. Democrats running the town, Republicans. Remember Barbara Nicola? I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah,
always.
It's been a very long time, Paul. Very long time.
Yeah, shows how old. Someone said the other day, we haven't had a Republican mayor forever in Hamden. So what about Barbara Nicola? They were trying to figure out, was that this century?
Yeah, that was 98, 99.
But anyway, Hamden's gotten bluer. That's the way the country has become more divided. Places like Hamden have become either more Republican or a Democrat. And because in Hamden, the only people getting elected now are seats that are reserved for minority parties, correct?
Right. But I mean, as far as Hamden goes and in relationship to Republican leadership around, I mean, you don't have to go very far from Hamden to find successful towns that are run with Republican leadership. So you can't just say that Hamden is blue and will stay blue. I didn't say
to stay blue. I was going to say, look at New York City.
Hope not.
New York City's bluest city in the country. They've been electing more Republicans than Democrats in the last couple of decades. Massachusetts is a true blue state. They elect more Republican governors than Democrat governors. So things are up for, it's always up for grabs. So Jay, how's it looking in Hamden? You think you got a shot at winning?
I think I have a very good shot at winning. Historically, based on the numbers, you would think not. But by staying centered and appealing to people's common sense, I've gotten a lot of support in areas and districts that typically you wouldn't expect it. That may have surprised some people, but it didn't surprise me because when you're going door to door and you're speaking, face to face, the party politics part of it kind of goes away, and you focus on the reality.
And it is interesting when you talk about local issues, because some of them are ideological. There's no question. There are racial issues in the town that are ideological that we still can talk about in more complex ways that don't fit into neat categories. But what's interesting in Hamden right now, because we do a lot of Hamden coverage, one of the three big issues in town is town finances, perhaps number one.
It is.
And yesterday we interviewed people from the Working Families Party running for office in Hamden. They used the word far left to describe themselves. They said, when we talk about fiscal issues, we sound like Republicans because we believe on the state level, they elect people who want to raise the minimum wage, family leave, they want to tax the wealthy. They feel that at the local level, Democrats running the city, and the reason I said, you're Democrats, why are you running a third-party race? They said, because we actually believe on a number of issues, to some extent, we want to move the party far left, but we want to go in a different direction on finances.
I'm going to, and I'll say this,
right ahead, Jay.
that is completely untrue. Democrats do the same thing come election cycle, right? They always talk about fiscal responsibility, but when they actually hold office, they lack the courage, let's say Ned Lamont, for example, to stand up to special interests, and whether it's on a municipal level or whether it's on the state level, to make those tough decisions to actually cut anything. And that is across the board. And you and I talked the other day, Paul, about Aaron Stewart. Aaron Stewart is a Republican that leads a Democrat majority town, like Hamden is. And she made tough decisions. This is the first time, and I can't even tell you how long, New Britain delivered a zero tax increase budget to the people of that city.
New Britain, a Democratic city, has a Republican young woman who appeals to Latino voters, appeals to unions, appeals to moderates, and even some liberal Democrats.
But my point is this Working Families Party,
the Republican Party had a chance to run a statewide candidate who could appeal to people who weren't just their red meat base. They threw Aaron Stewart over the edge of the boat because the party faithful couldn't deal with a woman and they couldn't deal with someone who wasn't a hard.
Listen, Paul, we can go into the dynamics of that because it wasn't a one-on-one race.
That's how we poke each other, Jay.
No, but it wasn't. And just for anyone listening, that wasn't a one-on-one. The lieutenant governor race was three people.
No, first she ran for governor.
Well, I understand, but she didn't raise enough money to qualify for the grant, and
that's true. People actually told me she actually didn't go and get her delegates lined up.
Right. So she ran for lieutenant governor, and so it was a three-way race. And the winner of that primary did not get a majority. Plurality, yes, but not a majority. So it's a little different in that dynamic. But what I will tell you is that in going back to the local issues of the Working Families Party, there is literally no difference. What the Working Family Party is a way for Democrats to have unilateral control over every board and commission, because minority representation in town charters are meant to have different discussions and opportunity.
We saw that in Hamden.
Every municipality, and it's happened in Hartford, it's happened in New Haven. The Working Families Party is just another kind of smokescreen to have more Democrats where everyone's in unison and no one is
liberal Democrats. They are to the left. They're the left part of the Democratic
okay,
Party.
so
pro-labor.
Okay, you claim that. Give me an example of where they differ.
I would say that they are completely for taxes on the wealthy. Ned Lamont is completely against them. Ned Lamont says, he has the Republican talking points, as all his friends do in Greenwich, that I'm not going to punish success by having rich people pay anywhere near the percentage.
So
of their
you're talking about
taxes
one
that
Democrat in Ned Lamont because he happens to be wealthy, but the party
and the
line,
winner, the governor. No. I would say a big chunk of it.
5 years ago, all Democrats were talking about taxing the 1%. So you're using one particular candidate. I'm talking overall. The general theme for Democrats and the Working Families Party, regardless of what it is tax increases. Which group you decide to target is irrelevant to us. My point is there is literally difference.
Big relevance to people of America. People of America overwhelmingly support beginning to tax the very wealthy at somewhere near the rate we tax middle-class people. And that's a complete different question from whether you raise taxes on the working class.
But I would argue in Connecticut we're at a precipice where the people that the Democrats want to tax are leaving. Because before Ned Lamont,
there is no evidence that they leave if you were to make them pay.
Who's Paul Tudor Jones? You want me to list the name? You want me to list all the billionaires that left the state and left massive holes in our budget?
Some went to Massachusetts and New York. The heads of Alexion went to Massachusetts. Head of GE went to New York, where they're paying a hell more taxes, but they invest in infrastructure.
But Paul, the reality is there was nothing keeping them here.
And you know what's funny about this? You and I agree. The Working Families Party is doing an end around, maybe.
It absolutely is because
minority party.
Well, but here's in places like New Haven, it's going to get, or places like Hamden, it's just going to get worse.
So in Hamden, they reserve two council seats for someone other than the major party.
And by the way, vote for Seth Poole. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, that was New Haven, by the way.
I know, I love Seth.
So anyway,
they're at large seats.
Yeah. So when the Working Family Parties and cities goes after those at large seats, people like the Republicans say, "Well, you're just two sets of Democrats. You shouldn't be able to belong to the Democratic Party. Call yourself something else and go in." Other people argue that when the rules were written, there was an assumption that Democrats and Republicans, they were almost like antitrust cartel. For instance, register our voters in Hartford, when they elected a working party families party as register our voters, taxpayers had to pay for 3 registrars, even though you needed only 2. Because the law didn't say top 2 parties; they said Democrats and Republicans.
It's major minor party.
Yeah.
Whether working family
So I
party
think that's
is
antitrust if it were in business.
yeah, I mean, in business, I mean, and even in our town now, I mean, the balance is it's 2 to 14.
The biggest mafia is the government, though. Pay me or
But
else.
the government is you guys. It's the leading Republicans and the
Yeah.
Democrats. Silvio Parra says, thank you for listening, Silvio. Democrats are killing Connecticut taxes. No more Democrats in power. So, Jay, if that person's in Hamden, might be a vote for you. So tell us why you're running for mayor in Hamden, Jay.
Well, I'm running in mayor for Hamden for primarily to clear up that balance. I mean, that balance has been going back for so far. All right, the arrogance, the assumption that, hey, we're going to win, which was noted in 2015 by some prominent Democrats who walked away from the town committee. And they did it intentionally and vocally. They were not happy with that process of having the special election where they felt an unqualified person was going to get into office.
And Julia, thank you for listening, Gouds. So JR doesn't trust Jay to talk. Is there a platform here combative Romano? No, what it is you have 2 high testosterone males who go on radio a lot, which is me and JR Romano. So we love to mix it up because we actually started that where we actually agreed about something and found some way to disagree about it. But you'll be hearing a lot from JK. Keep
Right.
And thanks for your comment, Julia.
So that goes back a long, long way, that arrogance and the assumption that, hey, we're going to win. And you kind of forget about what the voter actually wants and what the voter actually needs. So if you dominate the council and you dominate the administration, you kind of forget about the taxpayer. We don't have an income tax in Hamden. We have a property tax. Our property tax is the 6th highest in the state. It's the highest of any town in the state.
I know. I'm really glad I don't live in Hamden, to be honest, because I live in New Haven and I don't pay taxes.
Well, we would
high.
love to have you live in Hamden, Paul.
Paul, I actually had a friend who had a home, who was actually foreclosed on in Hamden, not because of her mortgage, but because of her taxes got to a point where she couldn't afford the house.
So
anymore.
Hamden, is this accurate to say, Jay, that one of many reasons Hamden's in this problem, because most people seem to say this, is because they didn't adequately fund their pensions for many, many years?
Well, yeah, and I mean, they gave away
And that was
great,
both parties.
gave away great pensions. They gave away great, starting salaries, and which is fine if you're trying to attract great employees and you have the money to do so. But if you don't have the money to do so, you shouldn't do it. Or if you know down the road and you're a financial planner and you've been on the legislative council since 1997, and now you're all the way through, almost going into your 4th decade, and you're just kind of figuring it out now, that's not a good sign for Hamden.
So now you're kind of you're raising an issue that in the Democratic Party was raised against Mayor Kurt Lang. He fended off a challenge.
Correct.
From Lauren Garrett. And she was saying that, yes, those are longstanding problems with the pension. She felt that the town in recent years still hasn't made some tough choices about putting more money into the pensions. Like when you got this break for a few extra years.
Yeah, from
not to fully fund your pensions. Then you
Yeah.
got extra permission to go 85% rather than 100%,
Right.
rather than make other cuts.
Right.
But what I never heard from her was what she would actually cut in a big way to be able to fund the pensions more. She was saying she didn't think you could cut taxes. She just thought that you might have to raise them. But
no, I mean, with your income is your income, and if you're
$1 billion
deep in debt,
$1 billion.
how are you gonna you can't just go to your boss and demand a raise because you've got yourself in credit card trouble. The town seems to think they can do that.
So what would you do? Like if you win, how are you gonna more accurately fund the pensions?
Well, right now we have to. Right? There's no more wiggle room. There's no more favors from legislators having to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make.
So where's the money
cuts.
going to come from? What are you going to cut?
Well, you could start with the administration. I would like to see a 10% cut among all departmental budgets.
Mm-hmm.
The Board of Ed, they're up to almost $90 million,
and they're about half. They're more than half your budget, or close to half.
About 38%.
Okay, when you don't count the state money.
Correct. I mean, it's a good, very good, sizable portion.
What are you going to cut at Board of Ed?
And I'm not asking to cut anything at Board of Ed. But if you're planning on closing 2 schools and you have declining enrollment, you shouldn't be asking for any more money. Anyway, you should be asking.
So you
for
hold them
less.
steady, and that's 38% of your budget, and then on the other 62%, you'll ask for 10% across the board.
Correct. I have to
Do you
work
have any
very
thought
hard
what
with
that'll
that.
mean specifically? And I agree. Someone can come in and say to all your department heads, "Show me what it'll look like. Give me 15%. Give me 10%. Let's see what the implications are." Have you done any of that work out? Have you ever seen?
My department. They're not my department heads yet.
Mm-hmm.
But when they are, they'll know what's coming.
Because I've actually thought, I want to ask JR this too. I actually think it's a very legitimate question for a lot of these municipal budgets to think about across the board cuts. But then you really got to look at what functions is government not going to do. Because, in New Haven, we have cut the size of government, I think about 20% in recent years. We're doing more with less in parks. And it's really at the point now, of course, you can always find somebody who's a political friend who has a job. And you can do that for both parties. But what functions does government carry out that it should no longer carry out if you want to go through austerity?
Well, I think it just depends on what you're using the money for. So I'm going to give an example. I have no idea what it is, but I'm going to bet that the superintendent's office has quite a few members of the staff there. I'm always been an advocate. My mother's a teacher. I think we should be spending more money in the classroom than out of the classroom.
And everybody says that when you get into and no one disagrees. When you get to the fine point, often those administrators are paid for special state grants that aren't affecting, because you're state taxpayer, but it's not affecting your budget.
Hold on a second though. But state grants are given to the general fund. The cities can do whatever they want.
Well, often actually you have to do reporting on certain, let's say, teacher improvement grants. You have to have, and everyone says, we all feel this way. We don't want, in my organization, we don't have administrators to a fault. But often in government, you are legally required, unfortunately, if you're getting state money, grant money, to have someone who's monitoring how that money's spent. You have to hire people. You have to fire people who do wrong. You need a personnel director. You do want to develop curriculum. You want to have some standards.
Well, again, this is you're talking about some legislative issues, which is something that
no, separate.
It's not separate because it goes back to the unfunded mandates.
But you talked about maybe 1 or 2 for you people in the office answering phones, so maybe the superintendent should answer his own phone.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, I remember there was a superintendent of schools in the Valley that had a PR man, like had someone to deal with the press.
And some people say public information helps parents know how to get involved in stuff.
I
agree with you. Somebody else can
my
do
point
that
being,
job.
though, is this is where the difference is that I guarantee you can cost, because I've done this, and I'm sure you do this here, you can hire a private company to manage that at a much lower cost, and it doesn't provide the pensions and all the other liabilities.
Much better. You can get somebody doing something else, not because part of their job. But more importantly,
I'm just telling you, if we're going
to be intellectually honest, we have to talk about what functions government takes on the winner. Like if there's always been this, like in New Haven, cut the administrators, but nobody ever says beyond there were too many assistant principals, which is a good point at some schools. What major functions carried out in schools or in towns? Should we pick up garbage less? Should we maybe not have parks cleaned up as much? Should we just say we're not going to do literacy tutoring?
Paul, I think you're putting the cart before the horse. My personal perspective, you're asking to make discussions without actually reviewing any of the contracts. Aaron managed to do it, right? So my point being, and this is where I trust Republicans.
JR, can you get closer, Mike?
Oh, sorry. This is where I trust Republicans more than I do Democrats, because they're going to go through this budget with a fine-tooth comb. They're going to relook at contracts. They're going to look at firing. They're going to look at every way possible to make sure that we stretch the dollar the best way that we can. And I understand your point, like, are we not going to have garbage collection? No, we have to sit down. And I was there with Aaron when she combed through.
By the way, I meant this very honestly. I think we maybe do have to look at rethinking what government does and doesn't do. So I'm really interested in hearing a candidate from either party tell me this is something government does. People like the government does it. We just can't do it anymore unless you're going to raise taxes. Or you're going to find some other way to do it.
Or are they doing it efficiently? See, that's the other.
Right.
That's the other question.
Right, but like in New Haven, we really not that I'm sure every day you can go find something that's not efficient. But they really spent a lot of years doing as much with parks with half the people, using technology for the police department. I mean, they really have. I guess I'm convinced, because we've gone through the budgets with fine-comb, that you can always find some fat, but when you're really talking about 10% JK or JR, which some people think you need to do, I think you have to have an honest discussion about function of government.
Well, that's the Board of Ed. I mean, the board. I can't tell the Board of Ed how to manage.
No, but your other 62%.
The other 62%.
And you can show leadership with suggestions.
Correct. And that's where the department heads come into play. And being able to go through that budget in each line,
like for instance,
what do you need the $10,000
like an honest question, New Haven would be small business development.
Right.
So some people that's really good. It builds up the tax base. Other people say you can run it better with one person instead of two. And other people say, you know what?
I would say that's function of the mayor.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I would say, but I mean, like day to day, going out and working with small businesses, helping them get the state money to do stuff, facade improvements, helping people want to start
small
businesses. It's part of economic development. And some people would say government just can't do that anymore. Chamber has to fund that. Yale funds the Economic Development Corporation. Other people would say that's a good investment in building your tax base because they help businesses get started.
Well, yeah.
Those are the kind of honest conversations I think we need.
That's beyond honest. I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, our economic development department needs to be expanded. Our planning and zoning.
Expanded.
Oh yeah.
So how are you going to pay for that?
You have to redirect the costs. I mean, you have to redirect the money. You know, if you're trying for a 10% cut through all departments, I'm not talking about cutting the economic development department 10%.
So what would you cut 10%?
That's the challenge. I mean, that's the goal. I don't have the luxury of being able to go into all the departments right now.
But you can't think more
every
broadly. Like JR has often been here when he's talked about housing, and you know he's made some points that are interesting. You know, from a concerned perspective about what government can and can't do efficiently in supporting people's housing. I think those are the kind of things that one can in running for office. Not that you know every fine point, you haven't been there, seen the secrets, but you could think broadly about the role of government, right? Like you have concluded you need more of an investment in economic development because that builds the tax
planning
base.
and zoning as well, and IT development. But I mean, that's where you have to redirect that money. So you can't just say, like, well, you know, we would have to cut everything in order to achieve these.
No,
savings.
you wouldn't. You have to think of some like major. I think you have to think of some major functions that are done by government that you think they shouldn't do.
Well, and I'm going to go back to the point, and I know that the dirty word of privatization, right? Like, is there functions that the government's doing that they could hire an outside firm or group or person to do that is not a government employee. From a long-term standpoint, you're looking at a situation where you don't have the pension costs, you don't have the healthcare costs, which could be beneficial to getting to some of the 10% cuts if it's a functionality of an enterprise or another business that still provides the service that you're talking about.
That's another honest disagreement. The other side is that
they want more government employees.
No, it becomes an excuse to not pay people enough to live on, to have enough to retire on, enough health, that you're basically trying to just basically cheat employers. But I'm doing the hard, honest work of good negotiation like Aaron did. Rather than saying privatize and don't have any oversight by the public of what you want private companies to do, like the private companies that run the prisons. It's inhuman.
Well, but
it is worse than the third world. It is a human rights catastrophe because we outsourced, both parties outsourced private
But Paul, there's always bad actors. It's easy to pull, whether it's a private business, but I'm sure that, but this is my point. I'm not saying that once someone gets a government contract, they have it in perpetuity. It should be reviewed. It should be under public scrutiny. And the government who's paying should be able to set the guidelines, right? So my point being is I'm not going to disagree with you. There's always bad actors, whether it's government bad actors who are corrupt and stealing and mismanaging taxpayer money, or it's a private business that you're always going to get that.
And the other view is, though, when you're trying to get good actors, are you punting on government doing its job by doing the hard discussions with your union and having political support to have a sustainable budget that also treats people right and carries out public functions, or are you using privatization, the other argument, as an excuse not to make those tough decisions, help your friends get contracts to keep you in office?
Help your friends get jobs, too.
Right.
I mean, listen, look, this goes back to the exact point. I'm looking at it from a long-term stability standpoint of your property owners. And property owners that are, particularly in a town like Hamden, where the mill rate is really high, 6th highest in the state, where I'm sure property owners are like, we need you to be more efficient. And if that means privatizing some aspect of something the city does in order to make the taxpayer dollar go longer, people are going to be okay with that. Now, the working families, what they want are, and to your point, is it's more about government, more tax collection, more government control. Those are some things that I don't believe functionally work.
Tax, but there's an honest argument that, again, I'm not saying you're wrong, JR.
No, I know that.
Although I come from a different point of view. There's another view that says labor unions are important as a check on the wealthy and their influence in government, and that government has punted in the past to get reelected leaders by giving contracts that don't work, but that the answer, another perspective, is we are the government. We should make the tough choices with them and have government run it in the public interest rather than outsource. But that's
assuming the government operates properly and on the benefit of the taxpayer. They don't. The government, particularly those in administrative, non-elected positions, look at the taxpayer as a revenue source. They're not people.
They're not true. They often live in the town. Some do and some don't. But government still, if you're saying government will do its job regulating.
At the end of the day, someone who's working in a government job is more interested in making sure that they get a raise. And that's human nature, by the way.
I'm not sure. I know a lot of government
really.
People.
So there are
some people, not others.
Well, hold on. So when there's towns going bankrupt, you're telling me that there aren't people, there aren't unions that are demanding raises. And by the way, this minimum wage thing is not going to be great for the state of Connecticut.
Okay, let's put that.
But let's put it aside because it's going to cause the prices to rise and all that stuff.
But JR,
my point being
I
is
know
that
a lot of people in government who I don't think it's fair to demonize. They can make a lot more money in the private sector. They come here out of idealism because they believe in the function of government.
You're assuming a lot. You assume they can make more in the private. You assume they can make more in the private sector.
They don't see citizens. They're trying to save tax money for citizens on both parties. People who go into government, by and large, just like people who work at private companies, by and large, who work for Jay and his contracting business, they want to do a good job, and they're not out there to cheat. And I think
I'm not saying people are out to cheat
or try to see those taxpayers, someone just get more money rather than solve the problem.
So I tell you what, the first time you call me when a government employee walks in and says voluntarily, and I mean in mass, right? Like a union that stands up and says, we'll take a 10% reduction in our salary and a reduction in our benefits in order to not raise taxes.
You call me the first time in a private healthcare company that's trying not to give you benefits every day that you're deserving of their plans so they can get extra profit for themselves, says, oh no, we'll make it easy for you to get your health care. When you tell me on a company, the private prisons who are not giving people the basic standards under international human rights standards for how you should be treated in prison.
I don't think those people should have contracts though, Paul. So, but this is my point. We're talking about the functionality of government.
And we're talking about that on Dateline Hamden on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio, 102.5 FM, live stream, newhaven.org. We got
I know we're talking philosophically, I know.
No, this is great. I love having JR. JR Romano, Romano State Republican Chairman, and JK,
yes,
Hamden for mayor, candidate for mayor in Hamden on November 5th. That's this coming Tuesday. So, JK, what are your top issues in addition to finances?
Well, I think finances pretty much is one of the most, the top issue. We didn't really finish that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
As far as unions go, I mean, the unions and the Board of Ed and everyone that works for the town has to understand that we're on the watch list. I mean, we're in the crosshairs.
Meaning you could go into state control.
Oh yeah,
MARB.
Yeah, they're absolutely watching what happens in Hamden. So it's in the best interest of whether you're a union or a member of the Board of Ed or a teacher or a regular employee of the town, whether you're unionized or not, to do what's best for the town of Hamden, not just for the taxpayer, but for the longevity of the town. Without that oversight, without that interaction, without that cooperation, and plus you have the Legislative Council too. The Legislative Council has to play their part. I want to cooperate with the Legislative Council. I've been to Legislative Council meetings where the administration and they're miles apart, and they're supposedly on the same team. We're working for the town of Hamden. You get into budget deliberations, it's like an interrogation. I mean, it's uncomfortable.
Well, that was brought up last term and this was an issue in the primaries. One seat flipped from the person who ran the council, majority leader, to someone who beat him, used to be there, about this whole tone question. The people who are critical of the Lang administration, their spending, say that you need to ask tough questions, and that's what we're trying to do. The Lang administration says it turned into sort of a political agenda where people are very mean to the people who work for the government, and as you said, interrogation, and it wasn't civil anymore. So it sounds like you're more on the civility's been lost side.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially, you're talking about a Democrat-controlled council,
but there were two
and
factions.
Administration.
It was like a two-party
factions
fight for the last year.
Okay, but factions.
Yeah,
right. But it's still a battle. What are you fighting about? Are you fighting against each other? Or are you fighting for the town? You have to fight for the town. That's what you're elected to do. Whether you're getting just a small stipend, you're still entered the political arena to do that for the town, not for your own agenda, not for a party.
Mm-hmm. DFA has just tweeted, speaking on WNHH, JR Romano made a surprise endorsement for Mayor New Haven. Vote for Seth Poole.
For full disclosure, I went to college and played football with Seth. I've known him a long time.
He's a great guy.
He is a great guy.
He's a write-in candidate. So
I know.
but he didn't file some pretty easy paperwork. He could have been on the ballot as an independent.
Well, I was just going to say, and I don't know if you know this, the city of Waterbury once had a write-in candidate win.
But it was a mayor, an incumbent mayor.
Correct. And he gave out pencils. So when they went into the poll, it was pretty funny.
And that's happening. It's happening in Bridgeport right now.
Yeah.
Marilyn Moore is running a state senator is running a writing candidate. She lost the primary. Some of us believe she actually didn't lose the primary. She went on the machines and magically just about every absentee ballot.
I love how voter fraud only happens in Democrat primaries, by the way.
Oh, when President Trump had a commission, the only example he found of voter fraud was a Republican.
Well, Denise Merrill didn't work with him, so, and we just had a court case in Hamden that was won,
right.
Because they were not doing absentee ballots legally.
Well, I don't think you should. I think absentee ballots needs a complete overhaul. But in any case, so why isn't there a Republican candidate in New Haven or Bridgeport?
Well, it's not. I think, and look, I'm going to be very, very honest with you. I think anyone that wants to run
those cities.
Well, no, I think we have a real opportunity in Hamden, and anyone in Hamden that actually wants stable taxes and grand list growth, then you vote for the Republican candidate. Time and time again, I can point to. So that's
your answer about why Bridgeport.
Well, no, I'm going to get there. I'm just saying. So
take a little detour. Yeah.
So the reality of politics is, if you're going to put your family on the line, if you're going to put your business on the line, your reputation being attacked the way that you are, you want to have a semblance of victory, right? If people are going to invest in you,
and
I
believe you can win,
right? And so what happens in communities like New Haven and Bridgeport is that the machine that exists here, which is I mean, it's brutal.
You see, I've studied machines, and I think you're a little bit out of date. Politics is brutal on both parties. And
No,
it's
but
pretty vicious and horrible.
listen, there's a machine.
But
here.
it's just like you couldn't pick who the governor candidate was. In the old days, you could. John Bailey,
Correct.
state Democratic, could. In New Haven, Arthur Barberi, the machine boss, once said, I could take anyone off the street, make a mayor, and people believe then he did. Right now, they really can't do that.
Well, but I think I think in the culture in the Democratic Party today, they've kind of created their own monster within the progressives who are challenging, and then they cause these rifts. You're seeing in Hamden, the Working Families Party.
It's all about power. Taking that people don't want to run in modern politics if they don't see a semblance of victory. If it means they're going to get tarred and feathered.
Correct.
That does sound like excuse making that you didn't get anyone to run in Bridgeport and New Haven.
No, it's just how do you go to someone and say we're going to put your family through the ringer? You're going to take time away from your business. You're going to take time, and that the likelihood of your victory. Oh, and by the way, you have to go out and collect donations. It is a very difficult ask, and I'm gonna point to New Britain.
You know, I want to bring the violin player for a second.
It's not a violin. You asked me a question.
Yeah, but
Paul, I'm being honest.
But you're making excuses. Aaron Stewart
it's not
ran
excuses,
in New Britain and she won.
And you don't know anything about why she decided to win, and or why she decided to run, and I'm going to tell you right now because that Democrat mayor was a complete and utter disaster. And what ended up happening was there was a shift within the culture in New Britain where everyone started saying we have to get rid of this guy.
So basically, what you're saying is New Haven and Bridgeport have great mayors, so that's why you can't run.
No. What I'm saying is that the numbers are overwhelming. But one of the other things that's unique about New Britain and Hamden and Meriden and Danbury and some of these other communities, and I think that I think this is a big deal, is that more often than not, people are tied to the property. Right? If you own a property in a municipality, you're more tied to property taxes. And so sometimes renters don't have that direct connection to if property taxes go up, how that's going to impact my pocket.
Rent goes up. Yeah.
Well, right, but they don't give a direct correlation to it's Tony Harp's fault or it's this person's fault or it's the council's fault.
So are you supporting Seth Poole?
I tongue in cheek. I actually don't know where Seth stands on any issues, and I know Seth has commented before when I've been on the show.
He's been on the show a few times. Yeah,
I love Seth. He's a great guy. I think he is New Haven to me. He's so passionate about the city. He's so passionate about his community. I did kind of talk to him a little bit. I was like thinking about running as a Republican. But I think New Haven and Hamden, I think it's time for a different culture. If people want to see things differently, they have to start electing different leaders that say things differently. Not the next generation of the same thing, which is exactly what you're going to get in New Haven. It's exactly what you're going to get in Hamden if you don't change the mayor. It's what you're going to get with Joe Ganim. It's the same people. It's the same strategy. And nothing's going to change. If you truly want change in cities like this, you should vote for Republicans.
Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM, and Dateline Hamden. We're with J.R. Romano, State Republican Chairman J.K. Hamden candidate for mayor. He's a Republican. Jay, did you grow up in Hamden? I forgot. I'm sorry.
I grew up in North Haven, but right on the Hamden line, and went to Hamden Hall, up behind the Dairy Queen. If you're familiar with Hamden, so it's basically 2 blocks away. All my friends pretty much were in Hamden. My wife came from Hamden. That's the part of North
Haven that really is like not northern Hamden.
You cross the street, basically
by the Dairy Queen there.
Yeah.
By Ridge Road.
So Hamden has been my de facto, hometown. We bought our first, we rented in Hamden first.
And you raised your family here.
Correct. My wife is a Hamden native.
And what do you do for a living, Jay?
I'm a production manager with Ferraro's Painting and Restoration. We're out of North Haven. I had my own business out of college.
What kind of business was that?
It was painting and wall covering.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when we decided to get married and my wife was about to have her first child, we were about to buy a house. We decided that it might be in the best interest to...
You don't need to be up there at 11 at night worrying about filling out W-2s and stuff.
Well, it wasn't so much that. It was just having the steady income. The person I was in business with was also getting married at the same time and moving to Arizona, so I was going to be on my own. I did some subcontracting work for Ferraro's, and I told him, I was like, I don't know what my availability is going to be like because my, the nature of my business is changing. He's like, oh, come on in and talk to me, and I did. And I actually asked my grandmother, I was like, what do you think I should do? And she was like, take the job. And I was, all right, you're right. And
do you paint your own house?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, how many years you do that? How often?
What, my own house? About 4 years.
Because we've been waiting 7 or 8. I wonder, is that too long?
It depends how badly it's peeling. If it's okay and it's just a little.
And do you have to make a trade-off in terms of what's going to peel sooner versus what'll have other qualities?
Literally, a lot of it depends on what side it is. Usually, the north side takes the.
Because of sun?
Well, you'll have more mildew, more things like that.
Why is that?
It just doesn't dry out. So you have more moisture on that side. because
Is
it
that
doesn't get the
because
sun
of sunlight?
exposure.
Okay.
You don't get the sun exposure.
So, could you use a different kind of paint that lasts longer, but maybe wouldn't look as nice?
Most of the paints right now are formulated to give you the maximum protection. Depending on how much you want to spend per gallon.
Okay.
And each brand
So
has
you've been
their own
working.
top
So
of the
you
line
raised
one.
a family in Hamden.
Correct.
You've been working in painting and restoration.
Yeah, I manage all.
And how old are you now, Jay?
I'll be 55 on Sunday.
Okay, young guy. And so, what makes you at this point in your life decide time to run for office? Because I don't think you ran for office before, did you?
I have not run for office, but that 2015 event, really was kind of the wake up call for me.
You were a Democrat then, right?
Yeah, I was a registered Democrat. And technically, you kind of need to be if you want to vote in the primaries, because usually that's the election in a town like Hamden. Whoever wins the primary is going to get elected mayor. When I did see other Democrats starting to really question, the direction of the town, and I started to, my property taxes went up just like everybody else's. I mean, there were some groups that went up drastically. They're still fighting that battle, and didn't get much respect or cooperation from the town. I really started to question how the town was being run, especially having, managing a business on my own.
And are your kids grown?
Yeah, my oldest is
So you don't have to
23.
be-
I still have
yeah.
a 12-year-old though.
Oh, okay. So you're going to miss some time away from a 12-year-old.
A little bit, not
That's
so
hard.
much as I do now. I mean, I work about 60, 70 hours a week now.
Oh, you
so,
do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So JR said reason some people don't run is because your family gets attacked. Has your family been attacked?
My family has not been attacked, and I haven't intentionally kept them out
It's
of the
true in
spotlight.
New Haven that Tony Harper's attacked Justin Ellicker's family, but most of the time that doesn't happen in New Haven.
Yeah,
We
I
keep
mean, my
hands up.
kids.
He's right that it gets vicious and people's feelings get hurt. And,
Yeah, actually, my kids have a reputation. They all went through Hamden public schools. They've been involved, Boy Scouts and community theater and dance. And everyone that knows my kids know that they're very respectful. They're very well behaved. They're polite, and they're basically raised properly, what you want to call them. So I think to attack them would just be instantly frowned upon by people who know us, because we are fairly active in town.
And schools are, you had 2 kids in the schools. It
Four.
sounds like 4.
4.
Schools are a big issue in Hamden. You just did a big restructuring. Some of the craziest racial rules from the state. The most integrated school in the state was in Hamden with 4 groups, Asian American.
Yeah, Shepherd Glen.
Yeah, and they had to close it because the state said
It's not
according to
closed.
formula,
It's not closed yet.
but the state said it was not. It was segregated
Because
they
they-
defined it as non-white
non-white.
versus white.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the state. I mean, that's, those are the rules you're following.
Sometimes you honestly try to solve a problem and you make it worse.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that knows Shepherd Glen and all our schools, for that matter.
So what would you do? How do you feel about the restructuring of the schools that passed, and would you advocate doing anything differently?
Listen, the neighborhood school is the backbone of the community, right? If you're really trying to fix education, buildings and buses really aren't the answer. It's the socioeconomics behind the problems. I mean, you can take a child from anywhere and put them on a bus and put them in a different building.
Actually, they have done studies that said people who have gone from poor neighborhoods to middle class schools have done better in life. Like they have for the rest of their life, they earn more. I'm actually an agnostic on this whole question because I think there's a lot of counterproductive solutions. But they have studied it, and they say that lifelong there's a significant increase in opportunity.
The benefit of the town and the people that live in Hamden. I mean, the socioeconomic problems in parts of town need to be addressed. 100%.
And
Yeah, I would argue
argument-
Hamden's a middle class town, though. I mean,
It
well,
is.
other people,
Yeah.
but it has poverty more in the South, and other people argue you have to make all schools better, and that's the way you solve it.
Our
rather
schools,
than
our
try to
schools are
restrict them.
good. I mean, our schools are good. Our teachers are good, and actually, our administrators are fine.
Mhm. Well, there's a growing African American population. It's now a majority in the schools, and some of the parents there say that teachers don't really know how to deal with black kids. There aren't enough black teachers, or that the discipline is 3 times higher for kids of color than white kids in the schools. They do think there needs to be work toward educational equity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a model that's been going. That's across the country.
So what would you do about that?
Work with the board. I mean, the Board of Education and the superintendent. I know they're making plans on training and curriculum and
And you and I have
hiring.
talked about Southern Hamden because that has the largest African American population, often feels neglected by the town. How would you deal with concerns in Southern Hamden that they're being neglected by the rest of the town?
Well, certainly economic development is incredibly important. There's a federal opportunity zone there. We need to take full advantage of
I
that.
heard Michael Milken, is really getting involved in those opportunities. Though.
Well, a lot of people.
Thanks to Stephen Mnuchin. You didn't bite JR.
From Putnam Avenue down towards the New Haven line has been promised a lot of things throughout the years, but you just never really see it come into fruition. You need to be down there. You need to spend time down there and make sure that work is getting done. You can't just say it and have it be a campaign promise.
And JR, I know that there are very intellectually honest arguments Republicans can make, like Jack Kemp used to make, for the vote in traditionally Democratic voting African American neighborhoods. Why is it that you guys aren't connecting with urban voters?
I would disagree.
To the extent that you don't even have candidates because there's so little support.
But the problem is in communities, and we're talking about two different communities here. We're talking about
like
New Haven,
Bridgeport,
right?
Hartford.
But again, I'm going to go back to the point about you're operating with this machine, and whether you want to admit that it's here or not, it is.
I'm not denying that there's fundraising from contractors. I'm just saying it's not
right.
It operates much differently from how it used to.
So, but the idea that we're not connecting with urban voters, I would completely disagree.
Well,
because of
any votes.
Well,
I mean, New Haven was a 23,000 vote margin for Ned Lamont over, and we didn't even like him here.
We increased our vote percentage by 2%. Here's the thing, though, Paul, is that you have a Democratic Party that consistently scares, not intellectually honest.
Yeah, I feel like it's excuses now. You
really
could do battle.
Hold on,
you could do battle. You could do battle.
Paul, wait a minute. Hold on, wait a second. I'm going to give you a prime example of exactly what I mean. The Democratic Party and the Working Families Party makes everyone afraid to even consider a Republican. You know how many times I've been called a white supremacist by Democrats or what Working Families Party?
And do you remember Willie Horton ad, Lee Atwater? They said,
"What year was that? I was in middle school when that happened." We're talking
about Stacey Abrams. Some of the vicious ads they had about her in Georgia.
Hold on. So you want to compare Georgia to Connecticut?
No, what I'm saying,
so see, that's a straw man's argument. I'm literally saying
voters are stupid. They don't want. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about.
I literally just described a Democrat candidate talking about Mitch McConnell, and you're saying I think voters are stupid.
Wait, let me tell you something that happened in the primary here. There was an African American candidate who had a white political consultant. Tony Harper had a white political consultant, Mark Bergman. He had been the consultant to the governor of Virginia. He said the way you're going to win this election because you're in trouble is we're going to scare black voters into thinking that you're running against a white supremacist. So they did flyers.
That's what they're doing. That's what they do to the Republican Party all the time.
But it failed because black voters aren't stupid. So they said, no, we're mad that the bus isn't picking up my kid.
But Paul, you're arguing against yourself. They're the ones saying it.
But you're saying that's why you're not connecting. I'm saying people aren't stupid. They know their interest. Those tactics don't work.
So let me ask you a question, Paul.
It works with white voters.
So why then when I've asked for opportunity to speak at schools, and that's one of the reasons why I called you, they don't call us. They don't.
Do you call them?
If you remember the article, she reached out to them, right? That's what the article said.
But do you call them? No, you're
absolutely.
Right. The point he's making, Jay, is that and I don't think it's a bad argument. There's a school in New Haven. They're doing a civics class. They brought in two in a city. They brought in two speakers who were both Democrats. One of whom was a privileged guy from Westport. Why didn't you bring in Aaron?
Yeah, because New Canaan's like New Haven.
Good
by
point.
The way.
Good point. But in New Canaan, do they invite Justin Farmer from Hamden?
No, they invite Will Haskell because he's a sitting senator.
Okay, so in Avon, I'm just saying in Republican white suburbs, did they invite New Haven people to come talk?
Yeah, absolutely. You have Democrats there all the time. You have Johanna Hayes. You have Chris Britt. Absolutely. You have Joe Courtney. Absolutely.
Right.
My point is that more often than not in massive Democrat communities, Republican voices are shouted down. They're not allowed in the room. They're not allowed to. Look, I was one of the, I was here.
I'm not going to argue with that. I'm saying your point was that scare tactics from Democrats is why you're not winning. And
that is one
But the
thing.
evidence I gave you is that it doesn't work.
I don't think, and this goes back to it does work.
It didn't work in New Haven.
And you know why it didn't work in New Haven? Because New Haven is about interpersonal politics because it's a machine here. And Tony was not working well with other powerful people within the city. You and I both know in cities like this, there's voting blocks that are controlled by a certain group.
They're not controlled. That's the thing. And when we went, we talked to voters all day. No, I'm agreeing with you about that dispute. But we went to New Hallville. Hundreds of more people voted for Justin Elicker than last time, and hundreds of more stayed home.
I'm talking about influencers.
They weren't influenced by state representatives who sat out the race.
Well, hold on a second. Your assumption of an influencer versus my assumption of an influencer are two different things. I'm talking about someone that's in the community that works every day. It might be someone that is managing a homeless shelter. It might be someone that it's not a state rep. It's not Roland Lamar. I'm talking about influencers within the community. And that's not a new thing.
But that wasn't because of a machine.
That is the machine, though.
We voted the people we watched who pulled that vote. I'm not disagreeing.
So you're
with you
telling
about
me
the
there's
dispute.
not people. So that the people that worked for Justin weren't people that worked for Tony Harp 4 years ago.
Correct.
They
for
weren't.
the most part. I would say 95% were not.
and the people in the upper echelon were not. So why did Tony Harp lose that?
Because people wanted to change, and it was black voters
Why?
as much as many. They felt taxes had gone up.
I'm not bringing race into this. You are.
They thought government was not being run well. The school board
It
was a
wasn't.
mess. They thought lead
And
paint
Justin
wasn't
won't be
being
any different.
enforced. So I'm not saying you win. I'm not picking candidate. I'm saying your analysis is wrong about why the vote came out.
But you're arguing.
I'm not saying
you're
your analysis
arguing
is right
that
about what happened with people in power. I'm saying you're wrong about why
Tony
people voted.
Harp used a desperation measure.
It
But it
didn't
is a
work.
measure. But it is. Hold on. Why did they think it was going to work? Because that's what they do to Republicans.
Because a white guy from Brantford had a very racist ideas about how black people vote, which you're kind of agreeing with. You're saying they can be scared into voting against
That's
their own
not,
interests.
Paul. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I'm literally sticking to. This is what the Democrats do. You don't think they do polling on this? You don't think that specifically?
And you don't think Republicans nationally have been trying to scare white voters since Obama's been in, saying he's not really American and he's got some secret plans and with Kenya and all that kind of stuff?
Well, oh my God, Paul! I'm sitting here. I can't control
I'm
what
saying
other.
it goes
I can't
both-
control.
it
I
goes to
can't
both
control what other
parties.
people do in other parts of the country. But what I can tell you in this state, what I say and what I do in my actions and what I care about, when I want to talk to urban communities and when I want to talk to leaders within these communities, I'm not allowed to.
Well, you are invited, as you're all listening to WNHH's Dateline Hamden with J.R. Romano and
And by the
JK.
way, and this just happened yesterday with New Haven Register, where the Working Families Party head said that we were all white supremacists. So this idea that now I'm using their words. So the next time you have someone in here from the Working Families Party or any of these other campaigns that consistently say this about Republicans, I hope you challenge them on why they do that. Because I'm not making it up, Paul.
Okay.
It is what they do.
All right.
And I'm sure the charges of racism have happened to almost every candidate in 2018.
But there is racism in America that in parts of the country are really helping the Republican Party. I mean, voter suppression, people having to go 5 hours to vote in Georgia. I mean, it's terrible.
Okay, you want me to control Georgia?
No,
well, here's
I
what I
don't.
can tell you though.
I'm just saying
in the
that
state
it's
of
not
Connecticut,
one party's
Donald,
province. I
but,
agree
but
with
in
you.
the state of
I agree
Connecticut,
with you
George
that it works
Logan,
both
who's a
ways.
Hamden senator who works his tail off. He's an African American, and we are so happy to have him. But George won a district that also is favorable to Donald Trump. So this idea that somehow the rhetoric that you're talking about in terms of like you can't have it both ways. So my point is that whenever there is an opportunity for someone on the left that does not want to have an intellectual argument, their de facto argument is either sexism or racism. They do not want to have discussions on merit. If I bring up reforming housing, which you and I have talked about, I'm a racist.
Subject.
If I bringing up reforming education, I'm a racist. This is their de facto.
Okay, look,
So
I
my
get
point
called
is
as many
I
names
hope
as you
the
do,
next time you
JR.
have someone here that uses that rhetoric based on nothing, based on no facts, just their own opinion, I hope you make them justify it. Point to where have I ever done
Okay.
anything would deserve that
Advice
label, or
taken.
any one of my candidates.
Advice taken. JK, I want to get back to you before we run out.
Thank
What
you.
about policing? That's been a big issue in town. There was that April 14th or 16th shooting where a Hamden police officer went into New Hallville, 13 shots fired into a car, unarmed people, bizarrely going to the passenger side in the middle of it. And finally, most of those bullets through the car. Yale officer came and shot 3. Where do you stand on how the town is dealing with that matter?
Well, the town is following the procedures and the protocols. The officer has been charged. Obviously, there's going to be a trial. Eventually, it'll be wrapped up in internal affairs within the Hamden Police Department. Recommendations will be made to the police chief. Police chief will make the recommendations to the police commission, and that is going to take some time because now we have the trial. I'm certainly going to be looking at the decisions made by the police chief and the commission, and if I agree with it, I will.
Would you have done anything differently from Kurt Lang?
There's really not much you could do after the fact. You can set up commissions and committees, and I mean, I would have had a police chief much sooner. We haven't had a police chief.
And what would you be
for
looking
18 months.
inside the town or outside for police chief?
For police chief, we have to look at the pool of candidates. I don't know what the pool of candidates is. I know that search committee has done a lot of work. It's kind of fallen off the radar. I did talk to a committee member. I know that there's candidates. Both sides have to get looked at. Obviously, I've heard arguments that if you hire from within, you're promoting morale within the department. If you hire from without, you're getting
Right, there are different
fresh start.
circumstances, different years, and different needs. What the there's been an issue about school resource officers. The mayor wanted them at all the schools. He got some criticism saying it's not
Yeah,
appropriate.
he put it in his budget to have 5 in the elementary schools. You don't need police
How
officers.
about middle schools?
I think security guards are sufficient in the middle school. The high school it is, because we do have teenagers that go missing.
When I grew up, we were all scared of the vice principal. I always thought assistant principal meant like,
The disciplinary one.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
Arnold
had a dean of
Schwarzenegger.
students. We had a
Yeah.
dean of students too, Mr. Bean. And if you got sent to him, you were
Dean
picking
Dean?
up rocks. Yeah, you were picking up rocks.
Once I
outside.
got
Yeah.
called over assistant principal in 8th grade, I thought I was in so much trouble. He's a tough guy. He said he looked at an article I wrote in the paper. He said, "You were so hard on Jim Croce because he just died," and I thought people were like making him into some kind of great writer when I thought he was being overvaluated, and we became friends. So you
Yeah.
sometimes become
No, but I mean, obviously, especially in the high school. I mean, there's a lot of students there. They're young adults, they're teenagers. They're going through a lot of issues. It is good to have people who are trained to deal with that. I think that's what you need more in the elementary schools and the middle school. Are professionals, and I know they get the training, but we could always use more. I mean, you have to. That's something you have to. Stay on top
And
of.
then Hamden is gradually going to get some of the issues we dealt with in New Haven about immigration, undocumented people. You had an incident where a Hamden officer did a traffic stop. The man was undocumented, didn't know English. He was yelling at the guy. He didn't believe he didn't
ICE.
understand him.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm going to report you to ICE and shoot
Yeah.
you in the head."
Yeah.
Was that the right way to police Hamden?
Absolutely not. I mean, that's kind of a
how did-
no-brainer question.
Yeah. So how does the mayor deal with that?
Well, again, you look to your police chief and you say, well, why are you allowing this to happen? But there was no one to look to. The police chief, left 18 months ago. This is, if you didn't have, you knew he was going to leave, you should have had a candidate.
I actually think
ready.
Chief Cappiello is a pretty good chief. But
He's a great
but
chief.
He's not.
He's an
not going
acting
for
chief.
permanently.
He's an
yeah.
acting chief, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, just having that much time go by, where you have that kind of vacuum, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a problem, but when you do, you're kind of like, well, who do we talk to? And unfortunately,
And it was so
that
interesting to
position
me
wasn't there.
hearing people from Hamden talk in the schools talking about vaping, and I guess this is true
That's a
elsewhere
big deal.
too. That kids can't go to the bathroom because there's so much vaping going on in the bathroom. They don't have enough people
Yeah,
to
again,
have it
I mean-
watched, and they keep the doors closed. I wonder what you do about that.
Well, you need, that's where you need your security guards and your teachers. I mean, there's privacy, and then there's public health, and obviously it's not healthy to be vaping anywhere.
I think that the sad part about it is that they're probably, I think one of the technological advancements in vaping was that it's odorless. They may need to actually not make that the case so that these kids can't sneak off. And I mean, it's crazy to think, but it's become a major
Yeah, I know
problem
it's free
across the
enterprise
country.
and you're allowed to sell products, but that's just a stupid product. I mean, I understand if you're trying to quit smoking and you're looking for a safe alternative, which it isn't. I could understand that, but for it to become that popular so quick in the teenage thing, I mean, there's something wrong. There's just
JK,
something
what has been the
fundamentally wrong.
most either surprising or inspiring moment for you so far on the campaign trail in your first campaign for public office for mayor?
It's really, we were talking about Democrat versus Republican, and it's interesting that Democrats that are running in the Working Families Party need to, even though they identify themselves as far left, they have to kind of point out like, but we have some Republican values too, and that we're fiscally conservative. That's very interesting to me.
Did you have any personal encounters on the doors or in a debate that really surprised you or inspired you? You said, "This is why I do it," or "This is something I didn't know about my town."
About how widespread the same sentiment was in every, going door to door, when you have people on their front porch, literally almost in tears. We talk about hunger in Hamden, and
there's a lot of hunger in
there's
Hamden.
people who literally are changing their food buying practices based on how much they have to pay for their property taxes. There's senior citizens who, are on a fixed income and they paid off their mortgage maybe 30 years ago, and their payments every month are going up and up and up.
And this is a tough question. Do you give them a special tax break for seniors who own
There's
homes?
a minuscule one built into the town. I mean, obviously,
But other
that's-
people think that's not fair to other lower income homeowners. That takes away.
I mean,
from
that's something you have to look at. But I mean, anything you can do for any taxpayer as a safety net is one thing, but that just fixes the symptom. I mean, you have to look at the cure. And the cure is, the low property values, getting those up, growing that grand list. Because without that, that mill rate is always going to be incredibly high, and it's too high. But going door to door and finding support from people who you would say like, well, they'll never vote for a Republican, but we don't talk about Democrat, Republican. We talk about the town. and I've been able to get support in districts that, the old or Republican Party was like, well, we don't even go there because we're gonna get beat. I'm like, well, then that's where you have to go, because those are the people who probably want to talk to you and hear your ideas. Don't just assume you're going to lose. So I've made a lot of progress. People are saying, like, I've never seen signs in that neighborhood before. And it's like, well, because I did the work. I went door to door and I talked to people. I knocked on a lot of doors. I didn't go with my iPhone and my, Facebook Live showing it to everybody, because that's not why I was doing it.
Would you do, if you were mayor, would you use Facebook Live like Kurt Lang does? He really communicates with his constituents a lot. When there's a storm, he's out there where they're fixing the roads and showing you what he's doing.
Well, yeah, that's your job. I mean, that's doing your job.
But he does it more than most people in terms of using Facebook Live to broadcast. He's
well,
like a media outlet.
A lot of mayors do that, both Republican and Democrat.
Yeah, but there's also a ton of people.
Aaron Stewart does that.
There's a ton of people who aren't on social media. There's a lot of senior citizens. Our population is growing older. Some of them don't.
How best do you communicate with them?
You need to have someone going to those places and making sure that people are getting information. People didn't know. I've gone to the senior citizens' homes and we don't know. They don't know what's going on. So there has to be an effort there. Whether it's in print or a newsletter, that's not very expensive to just and have someone go around and make sure that everyone is well informed.
All right, J.K. running for mayor at Republican in Hamden, Tuesday, November 5th.
Vote for J.K.
Jay Romano, what
Yeah,
other big
vote for
races you're
change.
watching? Dan Barry, your Republican mayor, is on the ropes a little bit. You worried about that race?
I talked to Mark. Mark works really hard. He's done a great job in Danbury. We actually have a major opportunity in Fairfield.
Tell me about that.
Well, the sitting first selectman, there's a major issue where there was corruption and they were burying. It's not toxic. I don't know what you want to call it, but it was stuff that should not have been in the ground. And they've kind of not taken responsibility for it as the Democrats are kind of holding the line. And so that's probably going to be a big one. Believe it or not, out in Eastern Connecticut, we have an opportunity for Sprague. For your listeners, that's where Kathy Austin, she's a big Union Democrat senator, who's also the first select woman of Sprague.
Middletown, I'm hearing you're going to get Middletown back in the Republican
Well, we could. I think that an interesting. He has apparently there was like a New Haven address, a Middletown address. He's from Wesleyan, but he's like Chris Murphy's handpicked guy. But he's been running this weird national campaign against Seb, who's been in Middletown his whole life.
So
very bizarre.
How's that run? Do you think that's going to be?
I think it's be tight. I mean, obviously the numbers are. Democrats outnumber Republicans there, but I think it's a similar situation.
There's a split in the Democratic Party, isn't
Correct. Over this whole, he's wants to have Middletown its own Green New Deal and is just not focusing on.
East Haven has the most interesting splits because this guy he's a third-party guy. He used to be a Democrat, but the Republicans were kind of divided in their primary. The seat is open.
Sal Maltese has come around. They had to sit down. I think Big Steve's a really good candidate. But again, an open race, you never know.
If the press got the vote based on what would be really fun to cover, Steve Tracy would get 100% of the vote. He's Big Steve, the bail bondsman.
So would JK.
Oh, he's a World Wrestling Federation. You can beat guy who's a World Wrestling.
He's a big guy.
Federation
I mean,
guy
he earned his name. He's a big guy.
Like a TV show of a bail bondsman, and he's just this really great character.
And and you know what's funny when you look at him, he's a genuinely nice man. He's a good guy. But yeah. So I think there'll be some opportunity. I think Aaron's gonna be okay in New Britain. So Middletown. There's some issues stemming from this. There's a Port Authority issue where there's corruption, and one of the first selectmen, I think it's out in Eastern Connecticut, which was on the board. She's also kind of in a little bit of trouble. We'll see. We might be able to pick that one up. So
all right. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much, J.R. Romano and J.K. Kaye. J.R. Romano is the state Republican chairman, one of my favorite guests here at Dateline, New Haven, and Hamden. Hope you come back often. J.K., if you win, I hope you come back.
I certainly will.
Mayor of Hamden. And everyone, please vote on November 5th. Thanks
for JK.
For Yale New Haven Hospital. And you said Seth Poole in New Haven is your endorsement?
Seth is a close personal friend of mine. I think he's a great guy. I think he's all New Haven.
Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing financial support. And thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH station manager Harry Droz.
Thank you, Harry.
We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience from Hamden, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.